The silence of space stretched endlessly around the small research vessel Kethvara as it moved slowly through the debris field. Inside the ship, Research Director Vashti pressed his long, pale fingers against the control panel. His large, dark eyes reflected the blue glow of the scanner as he studied the readings with growing concern. Director called his assistant, Norath, from across the cramped bridge. "I am detecting something unusual in the wreckage ahead." Vashti turned his tall, thin frame toward the viewing screen. Pieces of twisted metal floated past them like deadly confetti. The remains of what had once been a human exploration ship were scattered across several kilometers of space. The attack had been brutal and swift. "What kind of reading?" Vashti asked, his voice carrying the musical quality typical of his species. "Life signs, sir. Very faint, but definitely there." Nora's fingers danced over his instruments. "It appears to be coming from an escape pod, about 200 meters to our port side." The Zalani crew of 5 gathered around the scanner display. They were researchers, not rescue workers. Their ship was designed for collecting stellar data, not saving lives. They had limited medical supplies and even less experience with other species. "The pod's power is almost gone," reported Medtech Thelis, her voice tight with worry. "Whoever is inside has perhaps an hour of air remaining." Vashti looked at his crew. They had been traveling for months to reach a distant star system, where they hoped to gather crucial data about solar formation. Their mission was important to their people back on the homeworld. Any delay could mean losing their window of opportunity, but there was a life at stake. "Prepare the docking clamps," he ordered. "We are going to attempt a rescue." The next hour was chaos. The escape pod was damaged and difficult to secure. When they finally managed to bring it aboard, they found a human male inside. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow, his life signs weak. The alien looked strange to them with his dark hair and compact build, so different from their own tall, pale forms. "He needs immediate medical attention," Thelis announced as they moved the human to their small medical bay. "But our equipment is not designed for his species. I will have to guess at proper treatments." For the next 3 weeks, the Zalani crew worked around the clock to keep their unexpected passenger alive. They shared their carefully rationed food with him, even though they did not know if it would nourish him properly. They gave him their medical supplies, depleting their own emergency reserves. Most importantly, they changed course from their research mission to head toward the nearest space station where proper help might be found. The human's name was Ji-hoon Kim. They learned when he finally regained consciousness. He was a commander in the Earth Space Navy, and his ship had been attacked by raiders while on a deep space exploration mission. He was the only survivor. "Why?" Ji-hoon asked weakly from the medical bed, looking up at Vashti through eyes still clouded with pain. "Why did you save me? You do not even know my species." Vashti was quiet for a moment. The question had troubled him during the long weeks of nursing the human back to health. His crew had asked the same thing. They had sacrificed their mission, used their supplies, and risked their own safety for this stranger. "Because it was the right thing to do," he finally answered through the translation device they had rigged up. "Life has value, no matter what form it takes." Ji-hoon tried to sit up but was still too weak. "But, your mission, your research? I heard your crew talking. You gave up something important." "Research can be repeated," Vashti said gently. "Life cannot be restored once it is lost." As the days passed and Ji-hoon grew stronger, he learned more about his rescuers. The Zalani were a peaceful people, devoted to science and learning. They were physically frail compared to humans, but their technology was advanced. They had been studying dying stars, hoping to understand how to prevent their own sun from becoming unstable. The research they had abandoned to save him was meant to help protect their homeworld. Millions of Zalani lives depended on the data they were supposed to collect. Yet they had given it up, without hesitation, for one human stranger. When they finally reached Omega Station, a busy trading post on the edge of known space, Ji-hoon was strong enough to contact Earth. The reunion with his people was emotional, but he could not forget the sacrifice the Zilani had made for him as he prepared to leave the Kethvara. Ji-hoon gripped Vashti's long thin hand in both of his own. "I will not forget this," he promised. "My people will know what you did, what you gave up for me." Vashti's large eyes showed confusion. "We expect nothing in return, Commander Kim. We are simply glad you will return safely to your family. That is exactly why I will never forget," Ji-hoon replied. As his rescue ship departed, Ji-hoon watched the small Zilani vessel grow smaller in the distance. He made a silent promise that would soon echo across all of human space. The Zilani had saved one human when they could have simply passed by. Now Earth would learn the meaning of true debt, and the galaxy would discover what happened when someone showed kindness to humanity. The story of the Kethvara was just beginning. The great assembly hall on Earth was completely silent. 3,000 representatives from every human world sat in their seats. All eyes focused on the man standing at the central podium. Commander Ji-hoon Kim wore his dress uniform, the medals on his chest, catching the light as he took a deep breath and began to speak. "Honored representatives," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "I stand before you today because 5 beings I had never met decided that my life was worth saving." For the next hour, Ji-hoon told his story. He described the attack on his ship, waking up in the alien medical bay, and watching the Zilani crew share their food with him, even though they barely had enough for themselves. He spoke of Vashti's kindness and the way Thelis had worked day and night to keep him alive with equipment designed for a completely different species. They could have passed by, Ji-hoon continued, his voice growing stronger. Their scanners would have shown them the wreckage. They could have marked it for later investigation and continued with their important mission. Instead, they chose to risk everything for a stranger. In the audience, President Minji Park leaned forward in her seat. She had read the reports, but hearing the story directly from Ji-hoon made it more real. Around her, she could see other representatives wiping their eyes or sitting forward with intense expressions. "What was their mission?" called out Representative Tai-ho from the Mars colonies. Ji-hoon's expression grew grave. "They were studying dying stars, trying to understand how to prevent solar collapse. The data they were meant to collect could have helped save their homeworld." A murmur ran through the assembly. The weight of the sacrifice became clear to everyone present. "And what happened to their mission?" President Park asked. "They missed their window," Ji-hoon replied simply. "The stellar phenomenon they needed to study only happens once every few centuries. Because they spent 3 weeks saving me and traveling to get me help, they lost their chance." Meanwhile, far across the galaxy, the Zilani Confederacy was facing its worst crisis in 1,000 years. On the homeworld of Zeliphi Prime, Chief Science Advisor Kethmer stood before the governing circle with terrible news. "The solar instability is accelerating," he reported, his musical voice heavy with sorrow. "Our star will begin the collapse sequence within 10 of our years, perhaps less." The 12 members of the governing circle sat in stunned silence. Elder Velther, the oldest among them, finally spoke. "What of the research mission? The data from the Helix Nebula?" Kethmer's large eyes dimmed. "The mission was... interrupted. The Kethvara rescued a being from another species. By the time they completed this act of mercy, the stellar window had closed. So we have no way to complete our solar stabilization technology," asked Elder Morinth. "Not with our current knowledge," Kethmer admitted. "We have perhaps half the data we need. Without the rest, any attempt to stabilize our star could make the collapse happen faster." The governing circle fell silent. 40 billion Zilani lived on the homeworld and the surrounding colonies. Without a solution, they would all need to evacuate to other worlds. But the Zalani had few allies and limited resources for such a massive undertaking. Back on Earth, news of the Zalani crisis had reached human space through diplomatic channels. Ji-hoon was now spending every waking moment traveling between worlds, speaking to anyone who would listen. His message was always the same. They saved one human when they had every reason to pass by, he told a gathering of military officers on Luna Base. They shared their food, their medicine, their time. They gave up their life's work for a stranger. Now they face extinction, and their former allies offer only sympathy. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Human colonies across known space began organizing relief efforts. Cargo ships changed course to carry supplies toward Zalani space. Engineers volunteered to help with evacuation planning, but it was not enough. Dr. Hyun-woo Lee, Earth's leading expert on stellar engineering, studied the reports from Zalani space with growing alarm. He called an emergency meeting with Earth's top scientists and military leaders. "The situation is worse than we thought," he announced to the assembled experts. "Their star is not just unstable, it is beginning a cascade failure that will lead to supernova. We are talking about complete system destruction." Admiral Soyoung Choi frowned as she studied the data. "How long do they have?" "Based on these readings, perhaps 5 years, maybe less. And their evacuation capabilities?" Dr. Lee shook his head. "They can move perhaps 10% of their population with their current resources. The rest." He did not need to finish the sentence. In his apartment that night, Ji-hoon stood at his window, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Vashtai and his crew were probably still conducting research, still trying to help their people. They had saved him without thought of reward, and now their entire civilization was dying. He activated his communication device and began recording a message that would soon be broadcast across all of human space. "My fellow humans," he began, "we face a choice that will define who we are as a species. The beings who saved my life are now facing extinction. Their act of kindness may cost them everything. We have the power to help them, but it will require sacrifice from all of us." He paused, remembering Vashtai's words about life having value regardless of species. They showed us what it means to choose compassion over convenience. Now we must decide if we are worthy of the kindness they showed. The Global Assembly Chamber had never been so crowded. Representatives from every human world, colony, and space station had gathered for what many were calling the most important vote in human history. President Min-ji Park stood at the podium, her hands steady despite the weight of the moment. "The question before us today is simple," she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "Will humanity honor the debt we owe to the Zalani Confederacy?" The massive viewing screens around the chamber showed images from Zalani space. Their beautiful crystal cities gleamed under the light of their dying star. 40 billion beings went about their daily lives, unaware that their sun was slowly preparing to destroy everything they had ever known. "The Zalani saved one of our own when they could have simply continued their mission," President Park continued. "Commander Ji-hoon Kim stands here today because 5 strangers chose compassion over convenience. Now those same beings and their entire civilization face extinction." In the front row, Ji-hoon watched as the president outlined the situation. The Zalani had lost their chance to gather the research data needed to save their star. Their evacuation capabilities were limited. Their allies offered sympathy, but little real help. "The United Earth Alliance hereby declares," President Park announced, her voice rising with determination, "that we will do whatever it takes to ensure the survival of the Zalani people. This is not charity. This is payment of a debt that can never truly be repaid." The chamber erupted in applause, but the celebration was short-lived. Dr. Hyun-woo Lee, Earth's top stellar engineer, stood to address the assembly with sobering news. "The challenge we face is beyond anything humanity has ever attempted," he said, his face grave. "We cannot save their star, Our technology is centuries behind what would be needed for stellar stabilization, but we can save their people. Admiral So-Yang Choi activated the holographic display, showing the proposed evacuation plan. The images were staggering in scope. Massive ships, entire fleets converted from cargo vessels and military craft, space stations transformed into temporary housing, complete planetary evacuation, she announced. We will move every Zalani from their dying system to a new home. The target system is HD 164,595, an uninhabited system with 3 suitable worlds approximately 40 light-years from Zelathi Prime. Representative Taiho from Mars raised his hand. Admiral, what are we talking about in terms of resources? Dr. Jinsu Park, the Alliance's chief economist, stepped forward with data tablets in his hands. His face was pale as he began reading the numbers. The evacuation will require converting 80% of our cargo fleet to passenger transport. We will need to strip mining operations from 12 star systems to gather construction materials. Every major shipyard in human space will need to work at maximum capacity for the next 4 years. He paused, letting the numbers sink in before continuing. The total cost will consume 47% of the Alliance's entire budget for the next decade. We will need to postpone the new Terra colonization project, delay the Deep Space Defense Initiative, and halt expansion into the Orion sector. The chamber fell silent. The scale of sacrifice was enormous. Entire human worlds would see their development plans put on hold. Colonies, expecting new equipment and supplies, would have to wait. Military expansion would stop completely. Furthermore, Dr. Park added quietly, we will need to establish complete infrastructure in the target system. Cities, power systems, agricultural facilities, manufacturing centers. We are essentially building a new civilization from scratch. Representative Chen from the outer colonies stood up, her face troubled. Dr. Park, are you telling us that saving the Zalani will set human expansion back by decades? That is correct, he replied simply. The chamber buzzed with worried conversations. This was not just about money or resources. This was about the future of human civilization itself. President Park let the discussions continue for several minutes before calling for order. When the chamber quieted, she looked directly at Ji-hoon. Commander Kim, you were there. You saw what they sacrificed for you. In your opinion, is this debt worth paying? Ji-hoon stood slowly, feeling the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. He thought about Vashta sharing his food, about Delis working day and night to save a stranger, about a crew that gave up their life's work for someone they had never met. Madam President, he said, his voice steady and clear, when the Zalani found me dying in that escape pod, they did not calculate the cost of saving me. They did not debate whether it was worth giving up their mission. They simply did what was right. He turned to face the assembly, meeting the eyes of representatives from across human space. They showed us what it means to value life above all else. Now we have the chance to show them that their kindness was not wasted on us. The vote was not even close. Every single representative voted to approve the evacuation plan. As the session ended and representatives began filing out to return to their worlds, Admiral Choi approached Ji-hoon with a serious expression. Commander, I hope you understand what we have just committed to. This will be the largest rescue operation in galactic history. We are betting everything on the idea that some debts are worth any price. Ji-hoon nodded, thinking of his friends aboard the Kethvara. Admiral, some debts define who we are as a people. The Zalani will learn that humans never forget kindness. Across the galaxy, work was already beginning. The great shipyards of Luna and Mars started converting vessels. Mining fleets changed course toward the target system. Engineers began designing cities that had never been built. Humanity had made its promise. Now they had to keep it. The massive shipyards around Luna worked day and night. their welding torches creating a constellation of sparks against the darkness of space. Captain Yoonji Nam stood on the observation deck of the converted cargo vessel New Hope, watching as dozens of similar ships underwent the same transformation around her. "It is amazing what we can do when we have to," she said to Commander Dong-Yuk Yoon, who was reviewing the passenger capacity reports on his tablet. "Amazing and terrifying," Dong-Yuk replied, shaking his head at the numbers. "We are stripping every resource from 12 star systems. The mining colonies are working triple shifts. Some of our own people are going without supplies so we can build these ships." Across human space, the great mobilization continued. On Mars, the massive construction yards that had been building the new deep space exploration fleet suddenly switched to creating evacuation vessels. The colonists of New Shanghai watched as supply ships that were meant for them turned toward Zalani space instead. Children in the farming world of Green Valley learned why their new schools would have to wait another year. Admiral Soyoung Choi stood in the command center of the orbital station above Earth, surrounded by screens showing the progress of Operation Sanctuary. Red indicators flashed across multiple displays, each one representing a delay, a shortage, or a problem that needed solving. Admiral called Lieutenant Minho Seo from his communications station. "We are getting complaints from the Tau Ceti colonies. They say their food shipments are 3 months behind schedule." "What did you tell them?" Admiral Choi asked. "I explained about the Zalani evacuation. They said they understand the cause, but their children are still hungry." Admiral Choi closed her eyes for a moment. This was the reality of their promise. Real people were sacrificing real things. Human children would go without new toys, so Zalani children could have new homes. Human colonies would delay their growth, so an entire alien civilization could survive. Meanwhile, in the HD 164,595 system, Dr. Heinwu Lee supervised the construction of what would become New Zal. Massive terraforming machines worked around the clock to prepare 3 worlds for habitation. The cost was staggering, but the work continued. Dr. Lee called his assistant, pointing to one of the construction sites. "The atmospheric processors on the second planet are failing again. We need more replacement parts. Take them from the Earth Colony Project on Kepler 442, he ordered. "Those colonists will have to wait." But the universe seemed determined to test humanity's commitment. The hostile Krex Empire, seeing opportunity in the chaos, launched attacks on human supply lines. Admiral Ji-hoon Kim, now commanding the escort fleet, found himself fighting battles while trying to protect evacuation ships. "Sir," reported Captain Unikong from the bridge of the destroyer, Resolute, "Krex raiders are attacking Convoy 7. They are trying to steal the medical supplies meant for the Zalani refugee ships. All available ships, intercept course," Ji-hoon ordered. "Those supplies do not get captured." The battle was fierce but brief. The human fleet drove off the raiders, but not before losing to escort ships and delaying the convoy by precious days. Each delay meant the Zalani star moved closer to collapse. Worse news came from the Zalani system itself. The star's instability was accelerating faster than anyone had predicted. Dr. Kethmer, the Zalani chief scientist, sent urgent messages to Earth. "The collapse sequence has begun earlier than expected," his translated message read. "We have perhaps 18 months instead of the 3 years we hoped for. Many of our people may not make it to the evacuation ships in time." In the emergency session of Earth's War Council, the news hit like a physical blow. Admiral Choi looked around the table at the exhausted faces of humanity's leaders. "We can increase the evacuation rate," suggested Dr. Jinsu Park, "but it will mean using every available ship, including our newest military vessels." "The Indomitable just finished construction," Admiral Choi said slowly. "She is the most advanced ship in the fleet. If we use her for evacuation duty and something goes wrong, we could lose our most valuable military asset," finished General Taiwo Khan. The room fell silent. The Indomitable represented 5 years of development and the most advanced human technology. She was meant to be the flagship of Earth's new deep space fleet. Using her for evacuation was risky. Admiral Ji-hoon Kim leaned forward. "What would Vashti do?" "What do you mean?" Admiral Choi asked. "When the Zalani found me, they had their most important research mission in centuries ahead of them. They could have calculated the risks, weighed the costs, decided that one human life was not worth their life's work. Ji-hoon stood up slowly. Instead, they chose to save a stranger. Now we must choose whether we trust our best ship and crew to save strangers." The decision was unanimous as the final evacuation phase began. Admiral Ji-hoon Kim stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching the Zalani homeworld grow larger on the viewing screen. Behind him, Captain Yoon Ji-nam and Commander Dong-yuk Yoon prepared their crew for what might be a one-way mission. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Minho Seo, "the star's radiation levels are increasing rapidly. We may only have hours before the system becomes too dangerous for evacuation." "Then we had better work fast," Ji-hoon replied. "Vashti is still down there with the last group of civilians. We do not leave anyone behind." The Indomitable descended toward the crystal cities of the dying world. Her crew, knowing they were following in the footsteps of 5 aliens who had once made the same choice for humanity. The Indomitable shook violently as she raced through space, her hull glowing red-hot from the radiation of the collapsing Zalani star behind them. On the bridge, Admiral Ji-hoon Kim gripped his command chair as alarms blared throughout the ship. "Hull temperature at critical levels," reported Lieutenant Minho Seo, his voice tight with worry. "We are taking massive radiation damage." In the cargo holds below, the last group of Zalani refugees huddled together in fear. Among them was Vashti, the same scientist who had saved Ji-hoon years ago. The elderly Zalani held a small child in his arms, whispering soft words of comfort as the ship bucked and rolled. "Sir," called Captain Yoon Ji-nam from her station. "Jump. Drive is charging, but we need 30 more seconds." Through the rear viewing screen, they could see the Zalani star beginning its final collapse. The brilliant light was becoming unbearably bright as the stellar core compressed beyond its breaking. "20 seconds, announced Commander Dong-yuk Yoon. The ship's hull began to crack under the stress. Emergency force fields activated to hold the atmosphere inside, but everyone knew they were running out of time. 10 seconds, Unicon called out. 5.4.3.2.1. Jump. The Indomitable disappeared into hyperspace just as the Zalani star exploded in a massive supernova, its light briefly outshining an entire galaxy arm. When they emerged in the HD 164,595 system, the ship was barely holding together, but every refugee was safe. 2 years later, the world that would become known as New Zelathi was thriving. Crystal cities rose from carefully terraformed landscapes, their spires reaching toward twin suns that would never threaten their inhabitants. Human and Zalani engineers worked side by side, creating something neither species could have built alone. Admiral Ji-hoon Kim, now bearing the scars of radiation exposure from the final rescue, walked through the central plaza of the new capital city. Around him, Zalani children played games with human children, their laughter filling the air in 2 different musical languages. Admiral Kim called a familiar voice behind him. Ji-hoon turned to see Vashti approaching, his long frame moving with the careful steps of advanced age. The Zalani scientist looked older now, but his large eyes still held the same kindness that had saved a dying human years ago. "Director Vashti," Ji-hoon smiled, clasping the alien's hand in both of his own. "How are you settling into the new world?" "Better than I dared hope," Vashti replied through his translation device. "The cities you built for us are more beautiful than anything we had on our home world. But that is not why I wished to speak with you." They walked together toward the science complex, where human and Zilani researchers worked together on projects that neither species could have imagined alone. The Zilani had shared their advanced knowledge freely, while humans contributed their talent for practical problem-solving and rapid adaptation. The governing circle has made a decision, Vashti continued. We are offering Earth complete access to our stellar engineering technology, our medical advances, and our quantum sciences. But more than that, we wish to propose a formal alliance. Ji-hoon stopped walking. An alliance. Our peoples saved each other, Vashti explained. First we saved you, then you saved all of us. This is not a debt that can be repaid with technology or resources. This is a bond that should last forever. In the months that followed, the Human-Zilani alliance transformed the balance of power in the galaxy. Other alien species, who had dismissed both humans and Zilani as minor players, suddenly found themselves facing a combined force that merged human determination with Zilani wisdom. The Krex Empire, which had attacked human supply lines during the evacuation, discovered that their former victims now possessed technology centuries ahead of their own. Peaceful species that had offered only sympathy during the Zilani crisis now sought treaties with the new alliance. But the true measure of the bond came 5 years later, when Admiral Ji-hoon Kim stood in the graduation hall of the Joint Human-Zilani Space Academy. Before him, young officers from both species prepared for their first deep space missions together. Today, you begin a journey that neither of our species could take alone, he told the graduates. You carry with you the best of both worlds. Human courage and Zilani wisdom. Human determination and Zilani compassion. In the front row, Ensign Minho SEO straightened his uniform. His grandmother had been among the last Zilani rescued from the dying homeworld. Beside him sat Lieutenant Unikong, whose great-uncle had served on the original Kethvara that first rescued Ji-hoon. As the ceremony ended, Ji-hoon watched the mixed crews head for their ships. The vessels themselves showed the merger of the two technologies. Human engineering made them tough and adaptable, while Zilani science made them faster and more efficient than anything the galaxy had seen before. Vashti joined him at the viewing window as the ships launched toward unknown stars. When we found you in that escape pod, the old Zilani said softly, we thought we were simply saving one life. We never imagined we were creating the future. Ji-hoon nodded, watching the joint exploration fleets disappear into hyperspace. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the greatest changes. Your people taught us that compassion is not weakness. It is the foundation of strength. And your people taught us that some bonds are worth any sacrifice, Vashti replied as the last ship vanished into the stars. Both leaders knew they were witnessing the beginning of something unprecedented. The Human-Zilani alliance would explore the galaxy together, defend each other against any threat, and prove that kindness, once given, creates bonds that can never be broken. The rescue of one human had indeed changed everything.